In this series of sermons, I've relied on two big sources of readings, the poems of D.H. Lawrence and the writings of Thomas Berry. So this is D.H. Lawrence. A sun will rise in me, I shall slowly resurrect. Already the whiteness of false dawn is on my inner ocean. A sun in me and a sun in heaven, and beyond that the immense sun behind the sun of immense distances that fold themselves together within the genitals of living space, and further the sun within the atom, which is God in the atom. And Thomas. The existence of the sun and the planet Earth beckons us to tell their story. Most peoples have their own story of the sun, its birth, and its significance. We come after so many of these cultures and their stories, just as the sun came after so many supernova explosions. A new moment for telling the sun's story is possible. All the ancient questions we must ask again. What's the meaning of the sun? How do we relate to the sun? Is it a deity? As a ball of thermonuclear reactions? Is the sun special in any way? Does it deserve its name, as former peoples designated it Apollo or Sol, indicating a solar personality? Or is it rather that the sun is identical to billions of other stars? These are the questions we must ask. I'm a bit frustrated technologically right now because the last two sermons, my tape recorder turned itself off. And I don't know whether it was so inspired by Betsy's playing that it just went off into oblivion of mystical bliss, or I don't know. So I'm going to check it more than once. It still seems to be running. My apologies for technological problems. So this series of sermons has been looking at the history of the universe as a frame of reference for building our own personal and collective stories. My mentor, Thomas Berry, said one time, the universe is the text without a context. All other texts, including holy books, must be understood in their context. So what I'm trying to do in this series of sermons is set a context, help us listen to the context that the universe itself is giving us. And in that frame of reference, we can then begin to build our own stories, our own texts for the 21st century. So we've come on a bit of a journey. In January, we talked about the primal flaring forth, when time unfolded from space. Whatever poetry you want to use for that, some 14 billion years ago. We went through hydrogen atoms, that kind of bonding that gave some material shape to the universe. We talked about stars, beautiful things. And then supernova, that kind of chaos that erupts in the middle of space. So we're now to the part where I want to talk about the beginning of our solar system. So this is about, say, 4 or 5 billion years ago, maybe 10 billion years into the history of the universe. We're not arguing about Thursday and Friday here, but the tape recorder is still going, so we're in good shape. So what happened? What happened? Well, a star exploded in this part of the Milky Way. Where are we in the Milky Way? We're quite a ways out. We're not anyways near the middle. We're on the outer fringes of the Milky Way. And that was just a whole bunch of star debris. That's the best way to talk about it. What was left over after supernova? There was just a bunch of crud floating around. in the arms of the Milky Way. But amazingly enough, it started to get itself together again. And two things, and it didn't all just go into one big lump. That would be sort of the easy way, just make a big lump. But it didn't do that. It spread out. And the solar system got a sun in the middle, and then these thingies going around it, which we now call planets. And there's some of the planets have moons, and then there's these other things that are sort of, well, there's asteroids in the middle, and then there's these comets that periodically come whizzing by and go back out into nowhere, and who knows, maybe 100 years they come back, maybe they don't. So you got a sun, you got planets, you got other stuff, and you got comets and moons. And on one of these planets is where you and I show up. So today, in the sermon today, the story of the universe is starting to go from the big everything going out and getting more and more. It's starting to, come on in. Everybody's welcome all the time. We're starting to shift from the story that's going out like this, and we're starting to begin to see the story focus in. We're not going to tell the whole story of everything. We're not going to ask about planets everywhere. We're going to start to focus on our solar system, our sun. Next week, next month, we're going to start to focus on our planet. Pretty soon we'll be focusing on our species. So the whole story of the universe is going to start to turn inward. That's an important concept also, the ability to turn back in. So what can we learn from this the forming of a solar system? What are some things? Well, we can begin to see that the universe has some principles, some things it follows, some things that happen more than not. I'll get to Brooks' link, but I flew to Chicago last week. I was in Chicago. When you're on an airplane, that's a good time for thinking. It's a good time for thinking. So I thought, well, I'm going to write a song. So I wrote a song. It's the history of the universe to the 12 days of Christmas, and so it's, I got it, I did it all. And when I got to Chicago, a friend of mine was there, and he said, "Hey, here's a friend of mine." I said, "Well, what do you do?" He says, "Well, I'm a singer." And I said, "Well, really? I just wrote a song." And the guy said, "Well, my friend said, listen, everything he sings sounds like John Denver." And so I said, "I don't care." So it's now recorded and online. And Brooks, I'll get a link to you, and you can put it on the website. The 12 days, it's the history of the universe to the 12 days of Christmas. And it came to that verse on 5 golden rings. Well, so what came to me was 5 golden rules. But then I had to ask, well, what would be the 5 golden rules of the universe? So that took me between, say, Charleston and someplace else. Anyway, but I do think that when we look at the solar system and we look at the universe, we can say there's 5 things that I think we can say. These are my 5. Number 1 is what Thomas Berry calls the cosmological principle. That is to say, wherever you look in the universe, the same rules apply. If gravity works here, it works everywhere. If a hydrogen atom is this big here, if there's a hydrogen atom, it's the same thing everywhere in the universe. Whatever rule applies everywhere. And it's scalable. That is to say, if things are attracted at the macro level, then things are attracted at every level, at the personal level, and that. So, and If a rule applies to my body, it applies to my finger and my fingernail. Now, you may have to do some interpretation as to how the rule gets applied, but everywhere the universe has one set of rules. If you learn it here, you'll learn it there. Second, the second, third, and fourth I've gone through before. Communion. The universe is always trying to get things to work together. There's a deep-seated urge in the universe to come back together. Differentiation. There's also a deep-seated in the universe for things to come apart. And those two are in balance with each other. Communion and differentiation. And the fourth, the big word is autopoiesis, but that is to say, everything that comes into being has in and of itself a creative power to shape the future. And that's true at every level. So everything, that's true for you and you. It's true for a chair. It's true for the trees. It's true for the solar system. Everything that comes into being, when it comes into being, has self-creative power. Autopoiesis means the ability to be self-creative. And the fifth one is the universe moves towards complexity. That is, there is a direction, a discernible direction in the universe. And this is, you can debate this if you want. And if this isn't what your principles are, then that's fine. Come up with yours and then we'll have a conversation. I'm all for conversation, but I've been looking at this and it's what I say. This is what I get to say, it's what I say. But I'm open for conversation. But whenever the universe comes to a crisis point, its solution will almost always be an increase of complexity. And so like the solar system, when there was a whole bunch of junk in a particular space, what did it do? It got itself organized. The light stuff went to the middle and finally got so intense that it lit into a sun. And then all the stuff going around, one by one, stuff comes together. There's some beautiful exhibit at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and you can create a solar system. And what you do is you put you put a little thing here, and it starts going around, and then sometimes it gets all confused, and then other times you see, wow, a bit of balance gets organized here. And that's how it works. And I'll come back to how this affects us in a minute. That's the second part. And each of us have to ask, what do you say about how this whole thing came about? Is this just luck? Is it a crapshoot? Is it fate? Was it preordained? Is this the way it is? Is there a numinous presence in the midst? These kind of questions are really good questions, and can be the fruit of a meaningful conversation in the 21st century. And how you answer the question of what do you say about how the solar system came to be, how life came on planet Earth, how you answer those questions has a real effect on how you live your daily lives and how we organize ourselves as people and how we work together on the planet. I'll come back to those same themes later on in other months. So my second point, so the planet, as a planet and as a part of the solar system, we're at an interesting time. In some ways, our planet is at the same kind of a place that the solar system was in its early stages. Because of the presence of the human species on the planet. And the human species on the planet is sort of like all the stuff in this part of the Milky Way. We've now covered the planet, and we're at a point where we have to decide how we as a human species are going to function in our part of the planet. So as I said in my 5 golden rules, the universe moves towards complexity. And that same rule applies to us as a human species. And that is to say, the time is coming now for us to figure out how to move from onesie individuals to a species that functions and learn how to function together, and then function as a species relate to the planet. And that's a new twist. And I think it's important to understand that just like the solar system got itself organized, so that time has come for us as a species. And my poetry for this is the planet is waiting to see what happens. The universe, like wondering what's going to happen. You can imagine the universe looking at this clump of junk in the outer arms of the Milky Way. I wonder what's going to happen there. And lo and behold, not instantly, over time, the solar system came to be. And then you can see the universe kind of wondering, wonder what's going to happen on that third one out there. And then, lo and behold, the Earth unfolds. And now the universe is waiting to see, I wonder what's going to happen to the human species. What's going to happen? And the answer is not known. You could read all the books, and not do anything but read all the books, and you would not find the answer. Because the answer is within each of us, and it's waiting to come out. And that means, what does Betsy decide to do tomorrow? What does Sid decide to do tomorrow? That's how the future will unfold. So this whole trying to sit and look at the universe and listen to what's going on, and trying to come to some understanding and use that as a framework for where we are, this raises 4 deep-seated questions, in my opinion. 1's an easy answer, and 3 are not so easy. The first question is there an answer? Is there a final answer somewhere to all these questions? I think the easy answer is no. So we can get that one out of the way. So when I sit and do these sermons, I try to, and then I move on my intuitions. So the second question I had was, how do we foster creative diversity? So the solar system made some interesting kind of decisions when the way the planets got organized. They're not all the same. They're not all the same distance away. It's not like there's 9 planets chasing each other around in a circle. No, they're staggered. And each one is different. First of all, they're different distance from the sun, and so they're different temperatures. Well, that's different. They're different composition. They're all different. And that same question, I think, raises for us as a human species. How do we don't all have to be the same. How do we learn to be different and then take that difference and capitalize on the differences? And it's not that we have to be the same, but we have to learn to cooperate amidst our differences. I often use sporting teams. I mean, you don't want a basketball team with 5 guys that are 7'2", because who's going to dribble a ball in the middle of the court? If they're 7'2", they're going to lose the ball. But you don't want all the guys to be 5'9" either, because who's going to catch it under the basket? And that's the same thing within the human species. We don't all need the same skills. But what we need to learn is how to learn what our skills are and then how to capitalize on using the skills at the right time. Like my basketball analogy, you don't give the ball to the guy that's 7'2" when he's standing in the middle of the court. He's going to lose it. You wait till he gets under the basket, you throw it to him, and he dunks it. That's a better strategy. And the third question, so the first question is, are there any answers, simple answers? How do we foster creative diversity? And the third question, how do we encourage people-planet dialogue? Because the idea that somehow or another we can separate the human species from the planet at one time was a good idea in that it allowed the human species to develop within itself. But now, the bigger question is, how do we relate to the planet? Because it's an illusion to think that the human species is somehow separate from the planet. It's different from the planet, but it's not separate. And we have hundreds, depending on which you count, hundreds or thousands of years of tradition telling us that people and planet are separate, and some say people are in charge of the planet. But that's not true. Hollis is right. Bad idea. It might have, I mean, it's sort of like when a kid's growing up, I mean, you want the kid to stand on his own 2 feet. But you can't just go out and do whatever you jolly well please. So it's a both and. And we need to, in that context, the question arises, what is the unique function of the human species? And that's really going to be a question that I want to carry on for the rest of the month, for the rest of these sermons, as we go ahead and look at what's the theme and what role. But some of the ideas, the humans have a great capacity for thinking and planning ahead. Though we're not unique, I always, my frame of reference, everybody knows, is my dog. I mean, he knows what's coming next. I mean, when he smells Elaine cooking in the kitchen, he's smart enough to realize, if I go outside and up on the deck, I will remind them that it's time for me to have a bite too. He knows what's coming next. He does have a sense of sequence of things. But he's never going to master Clemson's strategic planning systems. And finally, the fourth question. For this whole conversation about how the universe got formed, how the solar system got formed, what can we learn, raises a question about what the phrase I want to use is the numinous, the presence of the numinous in the creative process. And another way to talk about that, but precludes some poetry, is how do you talk about the hand of God? How does the hand of God move in history? Those in some ways are the same. They're the same question. It's real easy when you say the hand of God moves in history to jump to some picture images that may or may not be helpful in the long term. But a group of religious people, of self-consciously religious people, in the 21st century, we have to find ways to explore poetry. And it is a poetry problem. It's a metaphor, it's an image, it's pictures, it's songs, it's poetry that begin to give us a way to talk responsibly about the radically other, about the numinous, about the hand of God moving in history. And the question of how did the solar system form is a touchstone for a place to look. Because you got to say, was it just sheer arithmetic? I mean, if you put all these rocks and little particles out there and you're bound to get this? I don't know. Or was there somebody looking down on, move that over there, move this over there? I don't think that either. So this is a hard question. And we don't have to answer that here right now, and I don't intend to, but this is the framework in which religious people in the 21st century have to grapple with. And we're the first generation on the planet to have been able to see the data, to be able to see how the solar system really works. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, he didn't know this stuff. So he could make stories that made sense to him. But those stories, for many of us, just don't make sense. Because we've gone to the planetarium at GTCC, and we've seen the M35, whatever it is that's out, and we've heard somebody tell us, well, that's a this and that's a that. And you either got to believe him or you got to think he's got a smudge on his lens. So we have new work to do at the point of creating stories. And this brings this, I want to bring this, the way I want to close is I want to bring this whole big thing back down to my personal decisions for each one of us. So where does this leave each one of us? First of all, we need to learn living with ambiguity is the way it is. That when the universe got to this point, the point when the solar system was forming, it was not clear exactly what was going to happen. And when there's all kinds of stuff all around, you got to decide what you're going to make of it. And that's true of my life, it's true of the universe, and it's true of at every moment. Second, we as a species have decisions to make, and you as a human being have to help decide what it means to be a human being. Because the old answers of put here, do what you're told, and things will be right, those answers are probably not adequate. And if they're not adequate, then the question is, what is adequate? And the answer to that is, well, that's why we have a group like this, to solve that, to work on those. And then, very particularly, each one of us have to decide what is your particular contribution to the shaping of the future. What's interesting to me is that, like, to take the solar system example, each of the planets became its own self and has its own unique characteristics. And that's true for each of us. Each of us have our own unique characteristics. And like a solar system is made of these things, so a congregation is made of unique individuals. And there's two sides to the question. You have to decide your uniqueness. I cannot tell you what you should do. I can encourage you to be you, but I can't tell you what to do. But once you've decided what you're going to do, you have to let the rest of us know what you think your unique gift is. Now, if your unique gift is just to sit on a chair and keep it from floating away, that's okay. Just tell me. All I intend to do is come here and sit. Okay, that's fine. Or if you're gonna play a piano, and write music, then let us know. And if you want to help Betsy, I'm sure she'd be glad to have somebody help. And if you got it, but you got to tell somebody what your uniqueness is. You got to let it shine. And that's my point. Whatever you think your uniqueness is, shine at that. Do what your uniqueness is to the hilt. And somebody will tell you when you're out of line. I'm sure of that. In this group, it'll definitely happen. But that's okay. But the universe depends on each element of the universe coming to its own selfhood and then shining that into the future. And there's all kinds of different things. There's some people whose great gift is to sit absolutely still and just sit and be. And once in a while you encounter those people and whoa. I did sitting meditation and studied under a guy who was the director of sitting at the Zen college in Japan. And that guy would sit still from 4:30 to 7:30 every morning. And I watched. Still sitting still. I mean, that guy, I can't do that. 3 hours of sitting still. That is. There's other people who are doers. I mean, they're out there doing something all the time. And there's other people who are knowers, who think about stuff. Those are all fine. There's knowing, there's doing, there's being. And each of those are important. And then find your skill, shine, and let somebody know. And then we'll figure out how to work together. And like the solar system came together, I look forward to continuing to work with this group as we come together to shine a light into the future. Thank you.